to make sure everyone's connected.
All right, we are now live on YouTube.
Great, I'll give it about 1 more minute. And Jennifer, do you want to go ahead and put up the presentation? Thanks. Great. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I'm sure other folks might trickle in a little bit late, but we do have a lot to cover in this 2 hours. And so I hesitate to wait much longer. I just want to thank you so much for joining us for the Community Working Group orientation for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program this evening. We're so appreciative of your time and grateful that you've chosen to invest in this important program in this specific way. My name's Katie Belliconi. You can go to the next slide, Jennifer. And I have the honor of leading the community engagement team for the IBR program. You'll notice a lot of folks in attendance at this orientation. Everyone in attendance is either a participant on one of the 4 community working groups or staff supporting one or more of the groups. Members of the public may be watching this meeting as it is being live streamed on YouTube. They also may watch the recordings of community working group meetings at a later date. With that, let's go ahead and take care of some general housekeeping. You can go to the next slide. We are providing closed captioning in both English and in Spanish. English closed captions are available within Zoom and YouTube. Users can follow this link found at https://www.streamtext.net/player?event=IBR. Users can follow that link to view both English and Spanish captions in a separate browser window. To access closed captioning, you'll want to go to the menu of options you see at the bottom middle of your screen. If you can't see the menu, hover your mouse over the bottom middle of the screen, then click on the CC icon and a separate window with captions will appear. Next slide. A few other things to note if you are participating in the meeting by Zoom today, which all of us are. ASL interpretation is available. Please let us know in the chat if you would like this service provided during your breakout session. Please join audio by either phone or computer, not both. If you have joined by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. After you are invited to speak, dial *6 to unmute yourself. If you experience technical difficulties during the orientation today, please utilize the chat feature or contact program staff at the phone number 360-329-6744. If you do use the chat feature, please note that only program staff will be able to see your questions or comments. Please also limit your chat to technical or accessibility questions. Next slide. Now that we have some of the meeting logistics out of the way, let's officially go ahead and get started. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us. We are excited to have this chance to speak with you and officially welcome you to participate on one of the program's community working groups. As someone who has been intimately involved in identifying interested and qualified community members to serve on these groups, I can confidently say that the diversity of perspective and passion from the participants we've identified to be involved in this process is truly humbling. During this orientation, we are going to cover the high-level role of each community working group, hear introductions from the staff team that is supporting this effort, and talk about the way in which we want to interface with each other in our community working group meetings. We will cover general program information to help ensure all community working group participants are starting from a similar level of program understanding in terms of background, current, and future work. Additionally, one of our urban designers will provide a broader context regarding how the program fits within the regional framework in terms of bi-state connectivity and placemaking opportunities. Lastly, we'll separate into breakout rooms by distinct community working groups, and you'll get a chance to meet your fellow community working group participants and hear a little bit more about what you can expect to discuss at your upcoming meetings. This will also be a time where you can ask any questions you might have. Next slide. But really, our goal for this session is for you to become familiar with the other individuals who are part of the community working group process, for you to feel comfortable and included, for you to better understand both the broader context of the program and the historical and environmental context of the program, for you to understand how the program plans to identify an IBR solution and what your role is in the process, including the community working group framework, schedule, and work plan. Next slide. At this time, I'd like to take a few minutes to introduce key staff members supporting the community working groups. Let's start with hearing briefly from our group facilitators. I'm going to ask the three of you to introduce yourselves and say which group you will be facilitating. Sam, do you want to go ahead and kick us off?
Good afternoon, everyone. Sam Imperati. I will be facilitating the Hayden Island Marine Drive group.
Fantastic. Monica?
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Monica Santos Panaccio, and I will be facilitating the downtown group.
Great, downtown Vancouver. And Anita?
Hello, everybody. My name is Anita Yap, and I'm going to be facilitating two committees. One of them is the active transportation, and the other one is the multimodal commuter. That's a mouthful. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And you will get a chance to hear from all of them a bit later in your breakout room. Now let's meet our IBR technical leads. Again, if you would each state your name, your role on the program, and what groups you plan to be most involved with. Are Vicky or Kelly in attendance? If not, what about Ryan? Derek or Katie?
Yes, hi, my name is Katie Mangle, and I'm the active transportation lead for the program. When we say active transportation, just to be clear, we mean walking, biking, and rolling.
Thank you, Katie. Is Brad here?
I'm here. This is Brad Phillips from the IBR program, and I am leading the highway and roadway civil design team. I will be involved with the Hayden Island Marine Drive group and the downtown Vancouver group.
Thank you, Brad. What about Tom or Ben?
Hi, this is Tom Bennett. I am the urban design technical lead. I'm also with the IBR group, and we'll also be involved in the Hayden Island Marine Drive and the downtown Vancouver groups.
Thank you. Additionally, we have members from almost all of our program partner agencies in attendance, and they will continue to be highly involved in these meetings. As so much of the IBR program overlaps with work and plans, both occurring within these jurisdictions and being led by these agencies. Our 8 program partner agencies include both CTRAN and TriMet, the City of Portland, and the City of Vancouver. Our MPOs, which are Metro and RTC, and then the Port of Portland and the Port of Vancouver. Lastly, we have many other IBR staff from our equity team, communications team, and leadership who are excited to be part of this process. Next slide. All of you are participating on one of the community working groups and have had conversations with program staff at this point about what it will mean to participate in this process. But I did want to take a few minutes and call out a few of the high points of the community working group framework that was established prior to us identifying appropriate representatives. Most of us probably know this. There are 4 different community working groups being launched currently. We have combined the orientation with all groups in attendance, but future meetings will be held separately. The 4 groups were formed to be topic specific based on 4 key elements of the program. We have the Hayden Island Marine Drive Community Working Group, the Downtown Vancouver Community Working Group, the Active Transportation Community Working Group, and the Multimodal Commuter Community Working Group. Participants on each of the groups include both at-large community members and stakeholders that were selected to represent a specific organization or perspective. We have placed between 1 and 3 community advisory group members on each of the community working groups to provide a direct linkage to relay broader community feedback regarding specific program areas directly to the program advisory group members. Each community advisory group will meet twice before the end of the calendar year. You will see the specific calendar dates later in the orientation today. The future meeting dates are also listed on the bottom of the orientation agenda. Next slide. As I mentioned, there are 4 topic-specific community working groups. From a high level, each of the groups will provide feedback on the following. For the active transportation group, participants will provide feedback on the design of walking, biking, and rolling elements across the bridge and its connection points. The Downtown Vancouver group will provide insight on the transit and highway connection to the interstate bridge, including potential alternatives and design options. Similarly, the Hayden Island Marine Drive group will provide feedback on Hayden Island and Marine Drive interchanges and connections to the interstate bridge, including potential alternatives and design options. And the multimodal commuter group is being asked to provide feedback on the bridge user experience from a commuter perspective, whether it's commuting across the bridge via transit, car, bike, or rolling. Again, we'll talk a little bit later in the orientation about the specific topics that might be covered at each of these meetings. Next, we're going to take a couple of minutes and talk about the meeting agreements we are asking all community working group participants to adhere to as they engage in this process and participate in meetings and communication with each other. This slide lists all of the meeting agreements we want community working group participants to embrace, and I'll talk about them in a little bit more detail in the next few slides. Next slide. Put relationships first, work to build community and trust. Oh, just a second, I can't see my slides. There we go. Work to build community and trust with an awareness of power dynamics. This means you're listening to understand, not listening to reply. Be inclusive. Next slide. Keep focused on our common goal. We care deeply about the participants on our community working groups, especially participants who are directly impacted by racism. Centering equity in the IBR program includes emphasizing our processes to create equitable outcomes. We engage the community by elevating voices of historically marginalized communities. Next slide. Notice power dynamics in the room. Be aware of how you use your privilege, from taking up too much emotional and airtime space or disengaging. We want to see you. Please keep your video on if you feel comfortable doing so. If your question or comment has already been made, there's no need to repeat it. And try your best to stay present and engaged. Next slide. Create a space for multiple truths and norms. Speak your truth and seek understanding of truths that differ from yours with awareness of power dynamics. Listen for understanding and different perspectives. Next slide. Be kind and brave. Remember relationships first.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, crap. I'm on.
Work to be explicit with your language about race, class, gender, immigration, etc. Be clear in your language, but stay curious. Ask questions before making assumptions. Next slide. Practice examining racially biased systems and processes. Individual actions are important, and systems are what are left after all the people in this room leave. Processes for mega transportation programs have existed for a long time. This program is focused on processes and outcomes. It is all of our job collectively to make the program a reflection of this community's values. Next slide. Look for learning. Show what you're learning, not what you already know. Avoid playing the devil's advocate. The devil has enough advocates. Adopt a growth mindset. Seek data to inform decision making. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Kelly Ann Amico, who is the program's public information officer. And she would like to take a few minutes to talk to you about the program's media protocol.
Thank you, Katie. So yes, I'm very excited to be here tonight and very excited about the launch of the community working group. So thank you for being here. Next slide, please. So there is a fair amount of interest in the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program, and it's possible that you will be contacted directly. And given that you're not a spokesperson, here's how we would prefer that you go about the process for that. So if you would, get their name, phone number, and their email address, find out the name of the news outlet, and then contact me. And there's my email, kellyann.amico@interstatebridge.org. So it's important to know that a few tips about reporters: they're not your enemy, they're not your friend, they're just doing their job and what they're trying to do is get to the story. Now, some of them have a specific narrative in mind. They will have interest in getting sound bites or quotes. So keep that in mind when you do interact with them. Some of them may seem negative, and that's because they deal with news, both good and bad. So don't take any of your interactions personally. It's important to recognize that as the program evolves, there are typically what we call the 3 C's of news. That's consequential, controversial, and curious. And I think those words pretty much speak for itself in terms of what we're getting at. There is a lot of interest in the bridge, and there is some controversy, of course, and it will impact everyone in the community. So that is a consequential piece as well. Next slide, please. So where do you come in? You're a volunteer for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. So if for some reason you are interviewed, note that you are doing so with your own opinions. You do not officially represent the program. In a media situation, please remember to listen and take your time to respond to a question. These are just general tips that we like to provide. And if there's a question that you don't understand, please just consider asking the reporter to rephrase the question so you feel comfortable in responding. Always feel free to say, can I do that question over again? And be yourself, be honest. Don't speculate on the future of the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. Avoid debate, and it's always best to be polite in conversation and not interrupt. Next slide, please. So with regard to social media, our following is growing, and we encourage you to follow our program if you don't already. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and we've just launched a TikTok program with the help of our very ambitious and engaged interns. It's a wonderful group, and they've done all kinds of great creative content. So with regard to social media, you are of course welcome to tweet content, for example, but please put in there that your views are your own and you do not necessarily reflect the views of the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. Please be respectful of others' opinions, avoid engaging in polarizing debate, which is a very popular thing to do, particularly on Facebook and Twitter. If you offer facts, be sure they're accurate and do not offer assumptions, predictions, hearsay. Transparency. If you post about the IBR program, please be transparent in your role as a volunteer and as a member of the community working group. Note that everything in public meetings is public information. Offline conversations with your volunteer peers is private. So if you have a conversation with someone else on the community working group and they say what their opinion is, this is obviously not something to put in a tweet or a Facebook post or Instagram. Those are obvious general guidelines. Please let me know if you have any questions. You can go ahead and put those in the chat and those will be forwarded to me and we're happy to respond offline. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kellyanne. That's fantastic, so helpful. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Alex, or actually Fabiola, who's going to give you an overview of the IBR program.
All right, thank you so much, Katie. Hi, good evening, everyone. It's so nice to have everyone here. I've also been coming alongside Katie and the awesome planning team to get to this point, and so there's a lot to celebrate with all of us being in the room. So I'm really excited to be presenting this portion of the program for you all. So I will be going over mostly the previous planning work and some of our underlying community engagement and where we are to date. And then I'll hand it over to Alex later on. There's lots of information in this portion of the program. And so I will try to go at a good pace. I would really encourage folks to take notes of any questions that come up. We will have an opportunity to ask questions later on in our time together. And so if you can make notes of anything that you need clarification or would like clarification on, just encouraging you to have a paper and pen or some way to take notes handy. And we will make sure to address that either tonight or along the process of you all working together. So next slide. So this is a broad overview of previous planning efforts that started nearly 20 years ago. So about 20 years ago, regional leaders came together and identified the need to address the I-5 corridor, including the interstate bridge, through previous bi-state long-range planning studies. And in 2004, Washington and Oregon Departments of Transportation formed the Joint Columbia River Crossing, also known as the CRC project. From 2005 to 2014, the CRC project coordinated with partners to study alternatives, identify a preferred alternative, also known as the locally preferred alternative, which I'll describe in just a bit, complete the environmental process and successfully received a federal record of decision in December of 2011. So the record of decision being an approval from the federal government to move forward with the project. And unfortunately, in 2014, the project did not secure adequate state funding to advance to construction, and it was discontinued. The locally preferred alternative are basically key components that were identified through the massive amount of work that was done between 2005 and 2014. And some of those key components that were identified and were included in the LPA were replacement of the I-5 bridge, 3 standard through lanes and 2 auxiliary lanes, improvements to closely spaced highway interchanges, light rail extension to Clark College, and a pedestrian and bicycle facility improvements. Next page. And so in 2019, there was a bi-state memorandum of intent signed by governors of both Oregon and Washington. And this was the official launch of the IBR program. It was shortly after that our program administrator, Greg Johnson, was hired and has been doing a great job leading a collaborative process since then. $80 million in combined funding has been dedicated by both states. There has been a bi-state legislative committee that provides oversight and guidance to shape this work. Both ODOT and WashDOT are jointly leading the program, and in close collaboration with 8 other bi-state partner agencies, which includes TriMet, CTran, Oregon Metro, Southwest Washington Regional Transportation Council, City of Portland, City of Vancouver, Port of Portland, and Port of Vancouver. Next slide. So this is, it can be a pretty overwhelming timeline. So we want to kind of break it down section by section. At the top, you'll see circled a summary of just more a broad overview of where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. And what you'll see is that, as I mentioned before, from 2004 to 2014, there were previous planning efforts. In 2019, there was a program launch, which takes us into program planning, which will then overlap with our environmental review process. And you'll see there that with a goal of identifying an IBR solution in 2022. You'll notice the bar, kind of the middle bar says community engagement, and that's just highlighting that through the entire process, we are working closely with communities that are impacted by this work and using creative and innovative engagement methods to be able to get to have a broad reach and really help meaningfully inform some of these the key points in our process where decisions are being made. So you'll see highlighted there that in 2021 and 2022, my colleague Alex will be talking more specifically about what work is being done in these years, and you all are a big part of that process for us. So I'm going to go back a little bit and talk about how previous community engagement has helped inform identifying our purpose and need and some of our values and priorities. So next slide. For our purpose and need during the program launch, we did some really great community outreach, and we learned through that outreach that the 6 previously identified transportation problems in the region still exist and are a top priority for us to address. So these are the 3 that most consistently were identified as the highest concern include congestion and reliability, earthquake vulnerability, and safety concerns. Other major takeaways that have come out of this community engagement is that folks are really thinking about how equity and climate can help us, can help inform our process and our IBR solution. So I'll be talking about that in just a little bit more. And so these, so actually let's go on to the next slide, and then I'll be going into the equity and climate component in just a little bit. So the community values that were identified through surveys and our community engagement in the last 6 months are laid out here. And it's a lot of text, and I hope that as you hear the categories, I encourage you to think about which ones resonate most for you and which ones you can really lean into through the work that you're doing. So I'm going to read out just the headings, the major headings. So there's a commitment to equity, there's environment, safety and reliability, cost and funding, transit and multimodal, and economy and community. So these are our underlying values that are helping shape the work that we're doing. Next slide. And so I'm going to be going into equity and climate a tiny bit deeper, but keep in mind that these are still pretty high level, a pretty high level overview of how we are talking about and thinking and the tools that we're creating to help guide our work. So we are really committed to embedding equity and climate throughout the program. And in order to help us do this well, we are developing an equity framework and a climate framework, which will help which are tools that will help guide our processes and decision making. They're frameworks that are in progress. You might see different versions of them come out at different points of the program, but they are they're work that has been led by our equity and climate experts, our IBR staff. And what they're going to be used for is to screen, they're going to be used to evaluate designs and used in our development of screening criteria. These frameworks will help guide how we think about performance measures, when we look at design and construction specifications, when we're looking at letters of agreement, and really when we're looking at overall program commitments, how we are enhancing community and mitigation for the impact that we're having. So I'm going to go into, so we can take a closer look at the equity framework. So that's the next slide. So the equity framework has, at this point, has 4 main components. There's the program equity definition, and it's, everyone thinks of equity slightly differently, so we wanted to be really clear about what it means for our program. So what does equity mean in the context of IBR? We will be laying out our equity objectives. What is it exactly that we want to achieve, and how does equity inform that? We will be thinking about measures of success. What is it that we want to measure, and how will we be measuring it? And finally, the last component here is how we're going to put it into action. So it's in thinking about our community engagement in action, our design, how are the plans developing, how are we thinking about construction specifications and the impact that that's going to have. So we really want to make sure that the equity work that we do is really meaningful, and we'll be able to share out really clear measures of how this is impacting the work that we're doing. Again, this is, I just want to emphasize that this is work that's in progress. We are in our planning stage of the program, and so you might see different versions of this later on. And before we move on to climate, I'm going to go share our equity definition. So that's the next slide. Our equity definition, we have 2 slides for this. This first one shows that we are thinking about equity in terms of both process and outcomes. So when we think of process equity, that means that the program is prioritizing access, influence, and decision-making power for marginalized and underserved communities through the program in establishing objectives, design, implementation, and evaluation of success. Outcome equity is intimately connected to process equity. It's the result of successful process equity, and it is demonstrated by tangible transportation and economic benefits for marginalized and underserved communities. And the next slide will provide specific examples of who we're thinking about when we talk about marginalized and underserved communities. Those communities include BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, people with disabilities, communities with limited English proficiency. Also, some folks you might hear the acronym LEP, persons with lower income, houseless individuals and families, immigrants and refugees, young people, and older adults. So together, this definition of equity is what is guiding the program, and we are embedding it in all aspects of what we do. Next slide. So for the climate framework, what you'll see here is you see 4 main components, and these are core considerations that are in the works. And again, this is a tool that will help guide our process. It's in the works, but I just want to highlight that, and I'm going to go ahead and read the 4 components. So in the first in the first part of it, we see that we have minimizing climate impacts, and that's in consideration to transportation options. We have minimizing climate impacts for construction, going down to minimizing climate impacts for operations, and finally, really building climate resilience. So thinking about environmental change and behavior change and how this program will be taking that into consideration. What you see coming out of these 4 main components or considerations is that we are also tying that together to our equity considerations and thinking about offsets and how that will inform kind of these big picture components when we think about climate impact. And while you can see here that our focus is on avoiding impacts, there are also occasions where we will be evaluating those offsets. So we want to make sure that we bring this full toolbox to bear when we are moving through the different components of the program. So that is my portion. I'm going to pass it off to Alex. So again, just encouraging everyone we're going to be going a little bit more technical in this next section. So encouraging folks to make notes of any questions that might be coming up. So Alex, I'll pass it along to you.
Thank you, Fabiola. My name is Alex Prentice. I work across a bunch of different disciplines on the project and try to keep our technical teams and our communications teams aligned and moving forward together. So as Fabiola said, this is probably the more technical part of the presentation. So definitely take notes, write down questions that you can ask later or that we can discuss in the breakout rooms. So we wanted to break out 2021 and 2022 and touch on some of the work that we are currently doing and some of the more near-term work. And so by near-term, I mean in the next 2 years. This is a very long project. And this is also going to take a little bit of a look at what you are supporting us in as we're refining the design options. Next slide, please. So there are 4 areas of design that are critical for the IBR solution. And IBR solution is the final design that is going to go forward into the environmental process, which we're also going to go over afterwards. As Fabiola explained, we are using some previous work to build a new program. And so there are a lot of changes that need to be made in response to contextual and physical changes. So through December, we are going to be studying these design options in interchange improvements, transit options, the replacement bridge, and active transportation. So as you can see, these are some pretty broad categories, and that's intentional right now. There is going to be so much time during the environmental process and design after 2022 to get down into the nitty-gritty details. But right now, we just have to make the major decisions so we can move forward with a unified design. So the goal is to have a recommendation for a design by the beginning of the new year. This doesn't mean that the design will be finished in any way, shape, or form. We're going to have to continue to work with partners and to work with advisory groups and to work in engineering terms to try to get to an IBR solution for the spring. So all of these options, you'll see it's a little bit confusing because we have tons of these options, right? We have the interchange improvements, transit options, active transportation, and the replacement bridge, but they're not really actually separate because they all have to be woven back together again to make this one unified design. Go to the next slide, please. So identifying the IBR solution. Our first step here has been to identify changes to the physical environment and context. And by context, we mean a lot of different things. This might be differences in policy. So we're responding in this program a lot more to equity and climate than we were in the previous program because it's really come to the forefront of the public discourse. We are developing design options now in those 4 categories we mentioned before to address these changes. And some of these changes might be land use policy. Some of them might be how we can minimize impacts to the environment based on policy changes. We are using data and analysis to evaluate these different design options. We are continuing to coordinate with the partners and with the ESG. We are engaging with advisory groups and the community like you. And then we are narrowing the design options to create a single solution. Next, please. So some examples of these contextual and physical changes. We have regional, state, and local equity policies and priorities, regional, state, and local climate goals and priorities, developments in downtown Vancouver and Hayden Island, Oregon tolling and congestion pricing. Demographics have shifted. There have been COVID-19 impacts on transportation. There are new or different environmental regulations. There are expanded transit opportunities stemming from some work that CTRAN has done on the Vancouver side and TriMet on the Portland side. There have been past and updated regional transportation plans that we need to address. There have been updates to federal aviation requirements. There have been changes in land use policies, plan development, and zoning. There are changes to federal transit funding requirements, and there are always shifting activities in freight and industrial use of the corridor. So that is just a few of the changes that we've identified, and we're modifying, or we're looking to modify the work that we've previously done to respond to all of these new changes before going into the environmental review process. Next slide, please. So that was all kind of confusing. And so I'm going to go through an example with you to sort of take you along on what we're actually talking about. And it's one thing to discuss process, it's another thing to actually do it and live it. And you're going to be doing it and living it with us. So we have this partial list of design options that we're going to be studying. Under the roadway umbrella, we need to decide interchange locations and layout, the limits of local street improvements, bridge configuration and height, and the number of auxiliary lanes. And if you remember from earlier in the presentation, those are some of our main decisions that we have to make. So we're going to take as an example the interchange options at Hayden Island. So this is an area where some of the changes, such as the land use or planned developments, are prompting us to look at some different design options. So for Hayden Island, we are looking at full, partial, and no interchange options. So how do we narrow it down and make that decision? Next slide, please. This is an example from how it was studied in previous planning. We advanced the design for a couple of different concepts to the point where it could actually be evaluated in a measurable way. So this is going to look very similar to the designs that you're going to be seeing in November and December that are going to be screened using the screening criteria that we are developing now. So this is the type of design option that you can see, that you'll be able to see in November and December. And there's going to be a multitude of these for each of the components or locations that we're talking about. And then we're going to look at all of them and objectively try to determine which ones are the best and which ones are going to knit together the best into a single program. Next slide, please. So when we say screening, this is confusing also. We have to look at the purpose and need, and we have to develop a bunch of different ways of looking at each of these design options. This is an example. It is taken from another project entirely because we have not filled this out yet for us. This is something that is in progress, but we wanted to make sure that you could see what the final product will look like at the end of December after we have evaluated all of the different design options. So you'll see here on the left-hand side, the support regional and local land use goals and objectives. That's an overall screening criterion, or that's a goal. So how are we going to measure that? How are we going to say, does this design option meet those goals and objectives? So you can measure it saying the consistency with local comprehensive plans, sub-area plans, and planned land uses, or the ability to support and enhance transit-oriented development and redevelopment in station areas. And again, this is from a totally different project. So don't get too attached to these questions or the way it looks, because our template will likely look a little bit different. You'll see the right two columns are the two different design options. And then what we do is we use the data and analysis, and this is going to take place in November and December, to see which options perform the best. And then we're going to be able to identify, okay, so for example, at Hayden Island, that example that we saw earlier, no interchange just isn't going to fly. It doesn't meet our purpose and need, and the data is telling us that. But it is telling us that the partial interchange or the full interchange are more viable in meeting purpose and need during the screening process. And so those will be the ones that we consider more. And again, that's a total example. That is not true. We're examining all of them. But I wanted to give you an idea of how we'll move that forward. Next slide, please. So some of the categories for the screening criteria for our program, you'll see that these match a lot with our purpose and need and vision and values. The equity, climate, the efficient movement of people and goods, environment and community health, cost, constructability, and then structural. So that includes seismic safety. So screening criteria are the most useful when they identify the differences among design options. So if there is a clear difference in cost between design 1, design 2, and design 3 for wherever you're looking, that's going to be indicative of a higher performing option. So we really want these screening criteria that we're developing to help us differentiate. So the decisions about which option is selected is going to be based off of the trade-offs that are differentiated among the screening criteria. So again, you might have design option 1 that is the lowest cost, but it's really not a climate-friendly solution. So we're going to have to trade. We're going to have to weigh. There's going to be different trade-offs, and those are going to be discussions that we all have to have together about what is the most important and what can work together. So next slide, please. So the environmental review process. This is a really, really critical part of our program and how we are going to get to construction in 2025. The National Environmental Policy Act, affectionately referred to as NEPA, this process involves a data-driven analysis of the program's impact on the environment. So the environmental impact studies from the prior study will be leveraged to inform all IBR work. And this is pretty consistent across all of the work that we're doing. We want to leverage everything that has come before while making sure that we're striking out on a new project. Given the physical and contextual changes within the program area in the last decade, a supplemental environmental impact study will likely be required. So what is a supplemental environmental impact study? So this is going to provide an in-depth analysis of the elements of the IBR program solution that respond to changes since the prior study and NEPA decision. These resulting changes to previously identified benefits and impacts to natural, cultural, and human environment will be documented. And then design refinements, benefits, and impacts will be evaluated through equity and climate lenses. The IBR program will continue to include mitigation commitments to reduce, minimize, or avoid potential impacts. So the process for this goes that there's a supplemental environmental impact study. There is a period for public comment, and then there is a combined supplemental final environmental impact study and an amended record of decision. We already have a record of decision from the earlier studies. So now what we're going to need to do is get an amended record of decision so we can move forward with design. Next slide, please. So we went over a little bit of what's happening between now and the end of December. We're defining the screening criteria, which you saw in both the matrix, and then you saw the list of some of the IBR programs screening criteria that we're going to be using. We are developing design options. So we started to identify already where we're going to need to make some adjustments. And now we are refining those designs. And those designs will be really similar to the slide I showed you earlier with concept A and B from the previous project. And then in November and December, we're putting all of those together. We're using the data that we are collecting all the time. We're using those screening criteria that will be finalized, and we're using those design options, and we're going to fill out one of those matrices for us. So the next part of the program, and this is really, really critical, is January through May, when we are going to put the IBR solution through the NEPA environmental process. In order to get there, we are going to have to work hand in hand with our partners, with our advisory groups, with our boards and councils, to make sure that we are on the right path. So even though we're going to have a pretty good understanding of which design options perform the best at the end of December, and we can make a recommendation based on technical information at that point, that's going to have to be stitched together in tandem. And so we're going to have to come up with this integrated design solution that includes all of the different components we talked about. So interchanges, river crossing type, transit options, and that might be the mode and the stations, and where there are park and rides. And so all of that is going to have to be woven together in conjunction with our partners together for this March, April, May time period when we will have made all of our major decisions. So that is where we are going in the near future. Next slide. I think that might be all for me. Okay. Thank you. We appreciate it. And again, I hope you took copious notes and questions. I'm sure that there will be some. It's a really, really difficult concept, all of it to learn in a day. I am not an engineer, and it has taken me a very, very long time to actually understand everything that's going on. So there is an extremely steep learning curve. And if you got like 3 slides out of that seemed like you understood, you're already doing really well. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tom Bennett, who is our urban design lead extraordinaire, and he's going to walk you through some community context elements. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Alex. Hi, my name is Tom Bennett, and I'm going to talk to you about community context. And what that means is, what it's really about is about understanding the context of your communities and the places that this project touches. The idea being is that we can respond better to these places, to your communities through this process, and really understand what's important to you in those areas that Alex has previously mentioned, the connectivity and transit and active transportation. So with that, if we go to the next slide, please. We'll start really quickly at the big picture just to understand where we are in the world, and knowing you've probably seen something like this before, that the IBR project is a key link in one of the most significant north-south connections along the West Coast, both for transportation, for freight, and really connecting all of these cities between Mexico and Canada as well as Alaska. Next slide, please. And if we zoom into our area, our region is really unique in the fact that this project encompasses 2 states, 2 cities, 1 island, and a fantastic working river that's also a great natural resource. So it's both an industrial, a commerce river, but it also has a lot of natural amenities and natural resources that are associated with it. Next slide, please. In addition to the natural resources, there's also several culturally significant historic sites along the river on both sides within our project area as well. Next slide. And that includes kind of starting from the earliest, the Native American inhabitants of the area. We still have the Delta Park powwow encampment that happens on the Portland side. Next slide. The annual canoe journey that happens here on the river. Next slide. And then other important historical events that we want to acknowledge and make sure that we're cognizant of as we move forward. The Van Point flood is one that's very significant and affected this area, both within the project and the adjacent communities. And next slide, please. As well as the Portland Assembly Center, where the Japanese were interned during World War II. Next slide, please. On the site of the Expo Center now. So how do we put all this together? The IBR program really touches a lot of different places and many communities on both sides of the river. And by putting these different layers that you see here together, we kind of look at how the program can better integrate with and support the visions and places of your communities and of these places that are adjacent to the project. So I'll walk you through some of these layers, and as I do that, I'll do it in asking some questions too that will be the part of a conversation as we move forward in the next workshops or next meetings, I should say, both in the connectivity and in transportation. Next slide, please. So here we have this kind of rich tapestry of places and destinations that occur along the corridor. Not only are there regional destinations such as downtown Vancouver and Hayden Island, the waterfront itself is a destination. There's the culturally significant historical sites that I mentioned earlier, and there's many, many neighborhoods, both around Vancouver and in North Portland as well, and Hayden Island. Next slide, please. And there's also a lot of locations that really work from enabling people to both live, work, play, shop, do the daily lives, all within close proximity to one another, and surrounded by all of these neighborhoods. Next slide, please. But one of the things that's important for this project is that this project, as well as other infrastructure such as SR14 and the BNSF Railway, serve in some respect as barriers between these places. So in a way, it kind of inhibits the ability for people to easily move across any of these to connect these places together. You could also say in some respects that the river serves as a barrier from a north-south direction as well, and that's one of the reasons why we want to look at how the bridge can be the best possible connection for all modes of transportation. I think one of the questions to think about as we move forward also is, are there other barriers in addition to these that we need to be considering in the project as well? Next slide, please. So here, this shows the existing connections across I-5, the small blue arrows that you see here going across the gray area, which is the actual right-of-way area of I-5. And with these existing connections, are there ways they can be improved? Are there additional connections that might be considered as part of the project? And in what types of modes should they be considered? So do there need to be pedestrian improvements or bicycle improvements or automobile roadway improvements that would help the communities adjacent to I-5? Next slide, please. And then transit connectivity. To the north here, we see in orange the existing and future BRT system in Vancouver and Clark County. The Portland, the TriMet system, LRT system, is in yellow at the bottom of this map, showing the Max line to the Expo Center. And one of the things we want to understand is how best we can kind of fill in the gap, really cross the river here and connect transit for both cities on both sides of the river. So one of the things we would like to know is, how can transit best serve your communities in these areas? Next slide, please. And then there's landscaping and placemaking opportunities. And this is really the spaces that are part of the project that are not actually part of the transportation infrastructure. So there's the bridgeheads and the river's edges, the spaces underneath the bridge, or the spaces that are adjacent to the river. There's land that's adjacent to both the highways and the interchanges. And then there's the transit stations as well, wherever they will be located. How can all of these spaces really improve your communities as well? What are the types of things that would be helpful there? Next slide, please. So if we zoom in now to the Washington side, a few of the things that we've heard are that it's important to improve connectivity both between downtown and Fort Vancouver, to improve access for both transit, roadways, and bicycle and pedestrians, for better sidewalk connections, and improve connections to the waterfront. Next slide, please. On the Oregon side, some of the major things that we've heard is on Hayden Island specifically, extend Tomahawk Island Drive as Hayden Island's main street, linking the east and west sides of Hayden Island, and future development that might happen in both of those places. Locating a transit station on Hayden Island and making that a central part of the island's community. Improving accessibility for Bridgeton, both to Hayden Island and access to the community as well, and then providing public access to the river here as well. Next slide, please. And so some upcoming questions that we want to you to think about for our future meetings. Is there anything that we missed here? Are there any other issues specific to your community that we should consider in relationship to this project? And which of those issues would have a higher priority for your community? Looking beyond the project, are there other places that you know of or that maybe you've experienced that could be examples of how to do something well for this project? And then finally, what impacts does I-5 have on your community that could be improved? Next slide, please. And then some questions specific to transit. What improvements would make transit better or more desirable to use for you and your community? What locations does transit need to serve? What would a new transit station, or where would a new transit station best serve your community? And what improvements to the street network would make accessing that station both more convenient and safer? And that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Tom. At this time, we're going to go into breakout rooms with your community working group facilitator and fellow community working group participants. In the time with your small groups, you'll have a program staff member lead you through individual introductions, talk a bit more about your group's upcoming meeting dates and topics, and have a few minutes for questions and answers. I'm thinking that we should spend maybe, let's do 40 minutes in the breakout rooms to give our community working group participants time to actually talk a little bit and have us listen to them. So Andrew and Brent, would you go ahead and provide instructions about how we get into the rooms that we need to be in?
Yeah, Andrew, if you could make sure we set that 40-minute timer, that'd be great. For those of us that are joining here today, we didn't know who was going to be here and had quite a few people here. So organizing the breakout rooms is going to be on you a little bit. When we open the rooms, you'll be prompted to join a room. So they are labeled North Vancouver, Hayden Island, and multimodal and active transportation. So if you know what room you're supposed to be in, go ahead and join there. If you have any difficulties, just stay in the room and we'll walk you through it if you can't figure it out. For program staff, please join the room that's most appropriate. And if you need to come back to the main session, you can at any time. So Andrew, as long as all those settings are good to go, let us know and we can go to the rooms.
Okay, I will open the rooms now.
So you just click on the breakout rooms. It's probably on the bottom of your screen there, and just select your room. And for the facilitators, please select your room. Anita, you can pick which one you'd like to go in. Staff, you can as well.
And Katie, as far as I know, we did not have any request for ASL interpretation to join a room.
Okay. I'm gonna wait just a second. Make sure. Does it look like everyone knows what to do?
We'll get them in there, Katie.
Okay, should I go ahead?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. See you soon. How do I get in? Why can't I get in?
I'll put you in the room.
Okay. Oh, there. I see. Got it.
Hi, Barbara. How are you? Do you know what room you're supposed to be in for today? Oh, sorry. You're on mute.
Sorry. No, I don't.
Okay.
Okay. Barbara, I can look up your information real quick.
Yep. Marion, do you know what room you're supposed to be in as well?
In active transportation, every time I tried to click on something, things kept shifting, and I ended up clicking on the wrong thing.
I'll get you there, Marion. Appreciate your patience.
I should be in the active transportation.
Okay.
Yes, both Barbara and Marion should be in active transportation.
Hi, I'm Allison Day. I'm also having trouble getting into the active transportation breakout room. I clicked on it and it went blank. Ah, I got an invite.
Yep, you should have got an invite there too, Barbara. Jamie, how are you doing? Do you know what room you want to join?
Yeah, which one's the best for transit? Is it the multimodal commuter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, yeah. Any of the program staff need help getting in, or are you just choosing to hang out in the main session?
I'm just hanging out here. I've got some side tasks while we're waiting.
Thanks, Bernie. Glad we could get everybody in. Mary?
My name's Mary. I'm not seeing an option to jump into any groups here. I'm supposed to be in the downtown Vancouver group.
Okay, we'll get you there, Mary. 1 second.
Okay.
You should get a prompt, Mary.
Oh, there you go. Thank you.
Okay, that went pretty good. So good job, Andrew and Jennifer. Appreciate that. And this is as much for me as it is for you, but we're still live on YouTube. Hey, Frank, we're in our breakout rooms right now. So if you want to join one, feel free to. If you need help to get into one, let us know. But they're choose your own adventure breakout rooms today.
Oh, okay. I got cut off and just rejoined with my phone only, and my computer's going crazy right now. I tried doing it there, and okay, give me a second, and maybe I will in just a minute.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
Yep.
Monica, can you hear me? Hi, John.
Hey there. Do you have a group you want to join, Sean?
No, I came in very late, so I was just maybe I should watch this just from a live stream. But
well, they're in breakout rooms right now. We have active transportation, Hayden Island, Marine Drive, multimodal, and downtown Vancouver. So if you want to join one of those and listen in, you're more than welcome to.
Well, I don't want to be disruptive, but
I don't think you will. There's a lot of people needs to be in there. So
okay.
Yeah, this is Ray. I'd love to be in the Hayden Island one. If you could put me in
Well, that was one I was going to choose too. Yeah, send me into Hayden Island. I don't know.
Yeah, you'll get a little prompt. So
thank you.
Accept the prompt. Hi, Anita. Did you want to go to a different room?
Hey, there's somebody here. I was hoping so. Yes, I would like to be put in the multimodal group because I have 2 working groups that I'm facilitating. So I was just in the active one. Thank you. Okay, see you later.
See you.
Hi, Allison. Are you hoping to get back into active transportation?
Yes, I had to pop out and use my phone.
Okay, I'll add you back.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Elizabeth. Can you hear me?
Okay, are we all back together again? Looks like it.
I can't see it. There you are.
You see
Okay.
me? Okay, great. I think we're mostly back. Well, I hope that all of you had just fruitful conversation like we did in the downtown Vancouver group. You can go to the next slide, Jennifer. And you should have all reviewed your upcoming meeting dates and your topics, but here they are again. They are also at the bottom of the orientation agenda that was emailed out to you. Additionally, they are on our website. We've now launched a community working group webpage on the Interstate Bridge website. So please do check that out for more information about these groups. But specifically, these dates and times are listed there and on the program calendar on our website. Lastly, you can expect to get an email from the program info box at least a week prior to each of your meetings to remind you about the logistics of the upcoming meeting and send you the agenda. Are there any questions that didn't get answered in your specific room that you would like me to either answer or take note of before we depart this evening? No? Feeling good? Okay, well, feel free to.
Oh, Ellen, sorry, Ellen has like her physical hand up.
Oh, fantastic. I didn't see that. I'm sorry. Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah.
I just want to know about those slides. Can we get those slides?
Yes, absolutely. We will be posting all material to the website after each of the meetings, and then we will send the link to each participant on the working groups that links directly to all the material that you saw. So in the next couple of days, you'll get an email from us with a link to that presentation.
Thank you.
Yes, Tom.
I think we all need drawings and things. Those three design options that you presented earlier. We need drawings of those so that we can discuss what's really going to happen. We're just talking pie in the sky stuff right now. So, and it's all nebulous. We need to get down to details, and we need those drawings and what you're planning on doing and what are the options.
Okay, well, thank you, Tom. It's duly noted, and I will say that, of course, it was a unique situation here today because we had all of the community working group members together, and of course, each person, we're broken into 4 different topics, and the focus and our intent for these upcoming meetings, they're going to be quite focused in what we are looking at and asking you all for feedback. And so we will be sure to bring detailed information at the upcoming meetings, but it will be quite specific to whatever your topic. I know your Hayden Island Marine Drive, it will be quite specific to that. But thank you for sharing that, Tom. Others? Okay, hope I'm not missing anyone. Well, lastly, I just want to thank you for the immense amount of information you let us share at you today. I know that was a lot in a really short amount of time, and we commit that in future meetings, we'll spend as much time as we can actually listening to your feedback. And again, thank you for your partnership in this process with us and in the program. And I wish you a good night.
Good night, all.
Good night. thought that went great, guys.
Yeah.
Nice work.